attend or was not invited to attend?
We only,
Representative Ravino for the CAT board. Are we only doing what was handled at today's meeting for the critical issues, or is this a finance presentation for all CAT stuff?
the last part of it would be potentially that if people so chose to discuss it.
Okay, because I'm saying that there are there's one other representative from Cumberland County
To the CAT board.
to the CAT board. Just want to make that clear.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what happened today?
Okay, well, let me start off that I think we had a very productive second meeting of the Critical Issues Committee, and all the counties were around the table. As far as representatives, the only local government body or county body, whatever that was missing from today's table, I believe was the city of Harrisburg, for whatever reason. Dauphin County's chief clerk, I sat next to Chad Saylor, and Mike and I were both there on behalf of our county. And then we had Bill Jones, showed up. It was a little late, I believe, in getting there, but everybody was there from all the different transit agencies, all the different counties. We did a review of what we did at the first meeting, and that had to do with the question of, at least initially, looking at what the governance structure could look like. And then we also, did a review of Toby pretty much talked about, our concerns, all of our concerns relative to service. What I did is I laid out on the table essentially, what I heard from our board, that, we are interested in moving forward as quickly as possible, of course, as responsibly as possible. I mentioned that since our last meeting that, this board had actually taken formal action for shared ride to enter into an agreement with YATA to create the Central Pennsylvania Transit Authority for shared ride service, and effective, the beginning of the year, we're going to have 2 members on that board with respect to shared ride. And anyway, then there was a number of materials that were handed out, and I can go over some of this, and Mike, you're welcome to chime in if you want, but essentially these were prepared by PennDOT, and what it shows is that if in this one scenario one, that if all of these fixed route providers in the area, that's CAT, Lebanon Transit, now South Central Transit Authority, which is Berks and Lancaster, and YATA, if all of those providers were to consolidate all at once, that we would be, according to the projections, looking at savings to all of our counties of as much as $17.3 million over the next 10 years. That's a cumulative total. That's why that's so much higher than the numbers that we were looking at initially, because I think that 2.4 million that was projected initially was just on an annual basis. Then there's another scenario here, a 2-tiered consolidation, where if CAT, Lebanon Transit, and YATA were to consolidate, and then later South Central Transit Authority, which is Berks and Lancaster, were to join, that we could save as much in local match of, and this is throughout the entire region, of $28.7 million. And then it points out if we don't, and this is, I think, the important point, if we don't do anything, that all of us together are looking at an increased cost of $29.5 million. So that, in other words, the local match over that same period of time of 10 years. So one of the things I think that was brought to the table today by Dauphin County was the fact that they actually believe that it's important that we factor in tourism here, which is something for all of us to consider too. And that, the prospects of down the road, you know, if somebody wants to get a bus in Lancaster, being able to come the whole way to Carlisle. And, you know, these are things that, you know, could work if we have a larger, you know, a larger organization. Now, I know that, you know, I said that, you know, I think we're interested, at least from my perspective, in moving forward with, you know, whatever is practical and, you know, as soon as possible. But I think the fact that when we left this meeting today, that everybody's still at the table, and there's a lot of other documents in here, and we can go over them. But I think all of the principles that are outlined here as to why we would do this, along with, you know, the issue of governance, along with the issue of local match, service impact. I think they're all well-founded issues that, you know, are certainly worthy of our consideration. And I believe that where we left it, let me also mention, one of the other focuses of today's conversation was on shared ride. That's really the common thread that all of our counties, you know, have in this whole process. And as we heard with CAT, for example, you know, right now, because, you know, you have to get shared ride service from CAT here in Cumberland County, if it's within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route. And then, of course, that we and/or now the Central Pennsylvania Transit Authority provides shared ride for everybody else in Cumberland County. Well, one of the things we talked about today is the fact that, you know, we could maybe do this a lot better if all of these smaller buses providing shared ride service for our seniors for, you know, to go to the doctors, whether it's a senior here or somebody who needs a medical appointment, let's say Hershey Medical Center. You know, it probably would make a lot more sense if some of these smaller buses that are passing each other were better coordinated. So that is something that Toby had indicated, and they've got a consultant involved now. Toby had indicated they're going to take another hard look at that as well, so that, you know, we might want to consider, you know, whether that's going to fit with this consolidation or whether that would be something perhaps that we might consider separately. But here's the deal, here's the bottom line, okay? No dilly-dallying here. They're coming back with a straw proposal to present to all of us on November 12th. Hopefully we'll have it back on November 12th, and it will be the subject of this discussion on November 17th at the Critical Issues Committee meeting, okay? And then we will see who's in and who's out and where we're going. So I think it was a very productive meeting. I think that everybody indicated a strong desire to continue to consider all of the possibilities. And I think that, you know, this, I think, will be narrowed down in short order, and we can hopefully move forward. I also mentioned that, you know, we are very concerned as a board relative to the current situation with respect to CAT, that we haven't seen the cost control measures that we were anticipating with the new funding agreement that we approved last year. And that I mentioned the fact that, you know, we're considering, you know, if it's possible to move forward with the implementation. I mean, that was July 1st, as I had mentioned before. The July 1st date was thrown out there as a hypothetical, the first Critical Issues Committee meeting, but I had indicated that it appeared to me from the conversations and the message that I was getting from my colleagues that we wanted to make that the target date, that firm target date to move forward. So we're going to, you know, I think we're going to move in that direction, and I indicated that, you know, there was a possibility in the event that, at least for now, that we may only include in our budget a half year's worth of funding to CAT, but hopefully, you know, consider budgeting funding for transit. And, you know, we're not going to leave our riders here in Cumberland high and dry without transportation service. So that's the gist of everything that I think that I had to report back from today's meeting. Invite everybody to take a look at these materials. If you have any comments, please report back to me so I know, you know, where we're going at our next meeting. Mike, do you want to add anything?
when they use the term municipalities, they're really only speaking of Harrisburg
And Lebanon.
and the city of Lebanon.
I think in some context, they use that to incorporate, to reference counties as well. Today, yeah,
Well-
I usually have the same question.
The concerns of individual counties,
Did
municipalities, and other
you give
towns
him a
and
full
authorities.
package of this stuff?
You have?
Yes, Jen,
We have.
oh, I don't know. Did you? I thought Jen did.
The five, these pages? Okay.
So I guess my question would be if you would ever sort of consider the West Shores a municipality.
Yeah, I mean, that's not, no, I don't think that's the reference here. I mean,
No, I know it's not,
Yeah.
but if that overture to those with that large concentration of ridership could be maybe identified separately.
Yeah, if you look here under the,
The governance,
the governance, what they're talking about, again, they don't want to create a board, I mean, this is just initial ideas relative to governance. They don't want to create a board that's too unwieldy. They're talking about, no more than 10 members. But then there's an option for smaller boards, committees that would provide, input on, local concerns or whatever. So that's one possibility. Then they're also talking about another model would be to have two boards. One would be policy board, one would be a technical committee, almost identical, almost, I was thinking of it to hats, where we have the coordinating committee and then we have the, technical committee of hats. So,
well then, the question under shared ride,
Yeah.
should that be structured separately?
yeah, those are things, like I said, hopefully at our next meeting, Toby will, and the folks at PennDOT will give some further. They had indicated that they were going to talk with some of the other counties relative to shared ride and come back to address that. But,
A lot of conversation about what to do with the savings. Basically, at the end of the day with the savings, it is budgetary relief to the counties, and for Cumberland County over a 5-year period, it would equate to the amount, the savings to Cumberland County would equate to the amount of less tax increase. So certainly significant, and it'll continue on, just short of perpetuity, probably not end within our lifetime, if you look at the math based on what the county subsidy is based on. But what I think is particularly exciting is the ability to use the savings to improve service, put more buses on. We talked quite at length about that, since that's all the participants' primary concern. Putting more buses, drivers on the roads, procuring new technology to improve the rider experience, relieving leveling, maintaining the rates, particularly also for the human service funding. So there'll be savings in those programs over time, especially with the administration of the share ride that Jim was talking about. And then that'll allow a bigger proportion of funding then to be used for other services for the folks that are eligible for those programs. So I think it's quite an exciting conversation that we had, and the potential beyond just the savings aspect, which is, I think, exciting enough. So I also have the
So, the Dauphin County's raising the issue or the need to take more into account, quote, tourism, end of quote. What exactly does that, I mean, everybody, economic development eligibility for grants, clearly integrated regional transportation system would be conducive.
I don't know that that's been fully defined, Larry. I think that I think what the thinking is, if I was hearing from Mr. Saylor and Mr. Buford today, the thinking is that, and whether or not there would be a practical route or not, the point is there's possibilities there for folks who maybe you want to, sightsee or go to the many attractions that we have throughout the region, and they would be able to, instead of, getting a tour bus, that, essentially they would be able to use public transit.
I mean, could you get a bus to the Senators game? Could you get on a bus right now and go to the Senators game? To me, that's tourism.
Yeah,
I mean, that's,
sure.
I don't have anything to do, I'm sitting, somewhere in a hotel, I wanna go to a game.
Yeah, but
I wanna go to Hershey Park. I wanna see that Civil War Museum if it's still open. I wanna get a bus from the Civil War Museum,
or come to
make a
the
change
Army
to
Heritage
the Army Heritage
Education
Center, and
Center.
then go on down to Gettysburg.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do that on a bus.
Yeah,
Ah,
but I mean specifically,
you can't do it today.
I guess I'm looking at scenarios 1 and 2. If I was emphasizing tourism, and let's just acknowledging that every place has some tourist attraction, the 3 epicenters of tourism in this 8-county region: Gettysburg, Hershey Park, and Lancaster.
Mhm.
Okay, and of course there are other things around it. And I don't expect that we can read Dauphin County's mind. That would seem to lead them in favor of scenario 1 of integrating, of having everybody come on board, including SCTA, as part of an integrated system starting on July 1st, 2016.
What seemed to be mentioned though by Toby is that, and again, there was Dave Kilmer was there from the, what's it called?
SCTA.
What Toby seemed to be suggesting is that, BART or SCTA may not want to come into this initially. And I think the reason for that is that they may not be able to, achieve additional significant savings right away.
Well, the difference is between 17.3 million
Yeah.
and 28.7 million.
Generally does.
Yeah, but they would have to identify, and we went through this, the way it works is, somehow through the consolidation, and we're talking about, the reduction of administrative overhead, and, would be able to, you save what it is, or I'm sorry, your local match is reduced by what you can save. You want to, the intent would be to, try to reach savings that would eliminate your local match. Okay, but you only, your local match is only eliminated when you've achieved those savings, which they suggested that there should be any difficulty in doing that. You should be able to easily meet, the savings through the consolidation of administration. But, in terms of where Dauphin is exactly, or where all these other counties are exactly, I think once they put down and reduce to paper a proposal, and that's what they're going to do, then we can, either pick that apart or go with it and find out where everybody is.
And that may not be a dedicated route. That could be simply a route, but you know what, it gets you to the airport. And I don't know if you can take a cat bus right now to the airport.
I think what's important is we don't just have, the group doesn't just have the 3 options that are listed there, that were kind of picked out because they were major directions. But it can really be any derivative. I would suggest that Cumberland County should not let our fate be decided by any other county officials. I think if we see the benefits.
Well, I don't think that's not going to happen.
Okay, I mean, even
That's
if it's
not- we all represent our citizens, but
Yeah.
I think we also got to keep our eyes open to, essentially, don't cut our nose off by our face either, if there's some real possibilities here for, regionalization for all these counties. So I think, it's important we see what they come up with here, and I do feel really good. Well, you do too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think today's meeting was very productive. Nobody walked out. Nobody threw anything at anybody. And, we have a positive conversation underway.
So if I can talk about CAT financials. For the first time, releasing to you the just approved, and I have to go by the capital board, their prior year financial results. I gave you the income statement. There's umpteen tens of pages of additional information. I think your eyes roll back. But really, the core focus and the core issue that we settled on for our funding agreement last year, the CAT is making progress on, is illustrated by this page. Take a look at the total expenses at the bottom. Prior expenses were 21.5 million. Current year expenses are 23.5 million, round figures, representing about a 10% increase. And where does that increase come from? A significant amount of it comes from salary and wage, but a far more significant amount comes in the friendly benefit line item, which increases a bit more than $1.5 million. Within that's in large part the increase in fringes is due to their pension expense.
What's purchased transportation?
That's outsourced buses and drivers where CAT doesn't have enough or chooses to
Don't have enough in their
use
fleet.
private transportation to serve a route, and they will engage like a Roar bus type organization to come in and provide the service
Okay.
for them.
And depreciation is on the fleet.
The fleet, the building, assets, various sorts, computers, software.
And that's taken one time? Every
That's over the life of the asset, probably averaging between 5 and 10 years on average, depending on what the asset is.
And that's all set by the IRS, correct?
Generally, yeah, not a lot of flexibility. Right. Yeah.
It's
That
just
is
if you're
generally
inheriting
uniform.
an aging fleet, you're buying into an aging fleet, which ultimately will have to be replaced, along with the proposal on there, although they sat and indicated that that did not seem to be on the table right now, the facility. Is that depreciation on the buildings? We
Yes.
don't know, everything.
That would be any hard asset you can see, it would generally be depreciated.
Okay.
Except for your small dollar
Okay.
cabinets.
So Mike, this is considerably more than the 600,000 that came out in the presentation.
Considerably more than the 600,000. There was an audit adjustment for $1.4 million to record additional pension costs, pension expense. So, one of the elements of the pension expense is the pension expense for administrative employees. The union contributes about 4.5% of their pay towards their pension plan, but management contributes nothing. And I suggest that's part of the issue. I actually, in government, I had not heard of.
Yeah, I know we talked about this earlier, but do we have any idea on how many administrative employees?
Still don't have that data yet. Yes, that was not included.
It really is unheard of, not
It is
not to have to make a contribution, toward your pension. And I don't know why administrative employees would be treated any differently than the bus drivers and the other employees who work for CAT. I think that's something that we should continue to press on. Again, in this day and age, I'm assuming it's a defined benefit.
It's correct, it is a defined benefit plan.
I have no idea why administrative employees at CAT would not be, contributing toward their pension.
I agree.
But we need to find, I'd be curious as to how many employees we're talking about that applies to.
But that's part of the reason that the expense increased so much. And is it high level? Again, Cumberland County pays, and it's more central to the discussion of regionalization and funding agreement. Cumberland County pays 2 to 3 times, and these cost increases only exacerbate that issue, that goal. 2 to 3 times what surrounding counties pay for, in terms of subsidy for their transit service, serving their county. That means York pays half to a third what Cumberland County does. Lancaster government pays half, or they're actually Lancaster and Berks are paying nothing now for 5 years because they've already taken advantage of regionalization. The back when we were paying, and hopefully we may as well. So I just want to keep it in mind, people. I'd like to talk about service for a moment. At the CAT board meetings, I've been hearing about declining, defecting riders, drops, rather precipitous sounding drops in ridership, which is a concern because after all, who are we in the business of serving? We're in the business of serving riders and trying to increase ridership. So I've been seeing in the current fiscal year, starting July 1st this summer, a drop through August of 10% in riders. It was reported at the end of the last fiscal year, this last July, the cash ridership dropped 5.1%, which was also concerning. So what I did was I wanted to kind of benchmark that with what else is happening in the region. And you look statewide and you see some increases in the negative double digits and some decreases in the negative double digits. You see some increases in positive double digits. So it's kind of all over the place. And there's probably core reasons for that, change in service, et cetera, et cetera. But in the region, it's fairly consistent. And I provided you this handout. This is from the PennDOT's performance report on public transit systems in the state of Pennsylvania. The last version that's reported, because the current, for the most recent fiscal year is not yet published, being worked on. You can see the rapid transit, the change from the 2013 fiscal year to the 2014 fiscal year. Rapid transit increased ridership by 7.3%. Lebanon Transit increased ridership 6.2%, pretty healthy increases. BARDA, Red Rose, a combined 1.5%, and CAT lost a 0.3% ridership. Now that's a little bit dated, but interesting. It kind of begs the question: how are we doing since then? Like I said, there wasn't published data, more recent published data for last fiscal year or for the last few months. But I had the benefit of having a meeting this morning with all the general managers of the region's transit agencies. So I reached out yesterday and by phone, email, and then connected with them today.
Mike, can I just hold that thought? I just want to ask a question. Because when I first got on the board here, I remember when I went over to the HATS meetings and so forth, that the representation was made that ridership was on the increase for CAT. Was that not true based on these numbers, or?
The numbers I referenced, the 0.3.
No, I mean, the gasoline prices were higher, but at that time I remember being, at least what we were told is that ridership was going up.
Was that overall, or is that a particular route? I mean,
For the past 3 years.
Because we just got that email on the F route.
Yeah,
Well, everybody's happy and there's a lot of ridership.
I think it's less useful to look at the trees for the forest. I like to look at the forest for the trees, kind of started at a high level so you get a better picture, more accurate picture of what's actually happening. So yeah, you can always pick out routes.
But this data shows that essentially for the fiscal year 2012-13 to 2013-14, as far as CAT, that the ridership was flat.
0.3 is fairly close.
Yeah, I would call it flat.
Yes. But then the most recent fiscal year it dropped 5%, and then year to date through August it's dropped 10%. So 15% since that flat year.
Well, maybe it would be helpful if we could take a look at we get some other years data to comparison too.
Yeah, well, I have that. That's
Okay.
that's what I want to share with you. So I talked with some of the, like I said, the general managers of each of the major transit agencies. And without saying who had what, although I'll be happy to talk to you individually, I just don't want to read about in the press. But in the prior fiscal year, the year that we're looking at this financial report,
The
In
year ending
contrast,
the 30th of June, let's call
Mhm,
it. Okay, 14.
15.
All right.
In contrast to CAC's drop of 5%, other transit agencies in the region, the major ones, had from between flat and an 8% increase in
Eight.
ridership. And flat and an 8%
8%
increase in ridership. So that's a gulf there of 13%. I mean, 5% drop to the 8% rise.
What was Rapids? Do you have Rapids?
1% increase. Yes, compared to 5%.
But that's building upon what they had already had from, 13 to 14.
Yeah, well, exactly, right, yeah. So, I mean,
It's
once
not
you
that they-
lose riders, you keep losing riders, your percentage is,
And you're saying CAS was minus, or they went down 5%?
they went down 5% last year. The current fiscal year, in contrast to CAT's 10.2% rider defection through August, the major transit agencies in the region report to me from between flat and a 4% increase, and the 4% increase, Jim, anticipating your question would be rapid transit as well. So,
Like any response from any of the customer feedback mechanisms CAT has in place, and they give the hints as to why they're losing ridership.
we heard the other Wednesday, many riders came in, actually and talked about CAT service. I don't need to replay that. I'm sure you recall. At today's CAT board meeting, the gentleman, Reverend Scott Minich from the Salvation Army showed up.
Yeah.
And he said what he told you, said in this room. Bill Jones' response to that, and just to refresh on the basics, what the Reverend Minich is interested in doing is getting, the underserved, the unemployed or the underemployed people that the Salvation Army serves, primarily over in Dauphin County, but here as well, over to the major employment centers in Cumberland County in part and elsewhere. He was having a difficult time doing that. And now both the Reverend Minich and Bill Jones were at the circulator meeting and then the following warehouse meeting. We're talking about providing new service. And at that meeting, Bill Jones said, to the folks there that he would need more funds to be able to do.
Just a quick correction, Bill
Yeah.
Jones was at the circulator meeting. I don't believe Bill Jones was at.
He wasn't at the warehouse meeting, thank you, yeah. But Bill Jones said he would require more funding in order to be able to provide additional routes. What I see elsewhere in the financials, from a financial standpoint, that to add new routes, the region's other transit providers, fixed route transit providers, aren't kind of nickel and diming, and the first thing out of their mouth saying, we need more money. Again, I remind you, Cumberland County is paying 2 to 3 times what other counties are paying for the service. So I think we're paying sufficient. But if I can talk about the Bill Jones explained that the customer has grown not on the service issue, which I contend is part of the reason for the drop. Fuel prices has kept ridership from growing kind of across the state, across the country. There's also an element of what we've been hearing about customer service is a reason for the drop, and the more precipitous drop in Cumberland County. And some of the things on that point are reminding me of Bill Jones explains that the customer has grown, and these are Bill Jones' words, the customer has grown not to depend upon the bus because it does not operate on time. Systems routes are confusing and poor supervision. The descriptions of poor service, yeah, we've been hearing.
How can someone in the service industry cite their client as the problem? I mean, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that they're citing the riders as the problem.
Well, not just the riders. In some cases, it's the the
But the
employers.
riders come to depend, not to depend on the bus because it's late. Wait, you're running the bus, so why wouldn't you have the bus on time? The problem is not the
It
rider.
reminds me of that great cinematic tour de force, The Clerks, where one clerk turns to the other and says, "This job would be great if it wasn't for the customers."
I mean, they're hemorrhaging money.
Yeah, it's not just the Salvation Army clients, but it's the employees. What Bill Jones explained to, to the CAB board, even though it was addressed at the Carlisle Circulator meeting, is that the problem is the fact that all the businesses, the employers have different schedules. And of course, that was already, for anybody who was at that meeting, that was already addressed. They actually start and stop, with rare exception, within 1 hour of each other. So he's, Bill Jones showed himself once again to be a can't-do guy rather than a problem solver and interested in solving the access to perk issues that Cumberland County in fact needs to have solved.
I think it's important to point out that Mr. Jones is not here today to defend himself. And so if we're going to talk about individuals personally, I think that they should have that opportunity to respond to things that are said about them. I've always felt that way with respect to the conduct of any meeting I was involved in as a public official. That if you're going to make charges or allegations against individuals, that they at least should have the opportunity to hear the allegations and respond if they want to in public. And
But I think what's
I think I understand the criticism. The issue comes down to service reliability, and somebody needs to be answerable for that. He is the head of the Capillary Transit Authority. So,
And I simply heard it exactly what he said, and we go back to every tape that he said, and every email that he's written, and every document he's produced. And for me, I am receiving this, that the rider is the problem, and there are no solutions coming that are not costing more than they cost last year.
I understand.
That's the bottom line for me.
Well, and I think there's, all of us have that heightened degree of frustration with respect to what's going on here, especially after we received a lot of the complaints from the individuals who were in here just, 2 weeks ago.
And I think too, when a year ago, the cost containment were the words that we expressed as a board needed to see this thing through. I'm seeing documents, whether you can defend them or not, there's no cost containment.
But Jim, to your point, I agree with you. I'm feeling a bit more frustrated because I just left a meeting hearing the exact same
thing.
Can't do expression when that was, I think, summarily addressed by many people in the room at the circulator meeting, by the employers, and there's folks
What
there.
we're really talking about
who
is
back that up.
I mean,
Excuse me?
individuals aside, we're talking about a system.
A system, a process.
That not only is its performance is deteriorating, but it is costing more that we are then expected to pay for.
And the point of my comment is not character assassination. It's simply to point out is this organization able to meet our needs. And there doesn't seem to be a will there. And I think that's quite significant for the discussion.
Okay.
If I can kind of put the spending numbers in context and the difficulties CAT has, they continue their hand-to-mouth existence. However, their revenues go up pretty healthy amount. State Act 89 operating funding, which pays the bulk of their fixed route service, increased nearly 10% in this current fiscal year, nearly 10%. And of course, you're well aware of Cumberland County's subsidy, their local government subsidy for all partners in CAT increased to mandatory 5%. So that's a pretty healthy guaranteed increase. We don't live under those kind of guaranteed increases here, and we're able to make our budget and improve the way we do things. Relevant also to the discussion on CAT and funding agreement considerations, regionalization. CAT failed to meet two of its four performance measures in 2015 that begs mentioning consideration. And as of in this fiscal year, So, you know, I think a school teacher would, not sure how a school teacher would rate that, 2 or 4. And then current year to date, they're also only meeting 2 or 4, and a third, they're only meeting by 10. So,
When this was discussed at the CAT board meeting, was there any commentary at all from any of the other board members relative to these issues that you've raised? And I'm talking about the other Representative Dolphin, the city of Harrisburg.
yeah, you know, we went through the...
What's the reaction from your colleagues on the CAT board to the, you know, to these facts or this information?
They're concerned about the overall spending level. Certainly Dauphin County, Chet Saylor is assistant treasurer of the board, and he talks about their spending level. We went through today, for example, the finance report, and there was discussion about the actuals versus budget, you know, some of the increases there. I think what's important to understand as and those are all things that need to occur, but the scale and scope of CAT's overspending isn't going to be altered by a % or 2 change, you know, on a line item here or there. You know, I think regionalization is our only opportunity to get to the point where we're paying, you know, kind of the norm, if you will, for service, and based on the discussions of the service needs of the county that we've been hearing about and talking about, I think that's equally as important, especially given our growth trajectory as the fastest growing county.
And I think that was what I was trying to allude to when these folks were here, and I tried as graciously as I possibly could to say, there are others who are doing this better. There are others out there, obviously we have a handful right in front of us here, and throughout the Commonwealth, that are doing this better. Why cannot those best practices be put forward here? You know, tried, opportunities, whatever. And I've not heard that that's, you know, it was thank you, but we're really not that interested in doing it that way.
There's been an acknowledgement, you know, I mean, again, considering what our current needs are and what our growing needs will be. There's been recognition, and you can read it in the press from CAT board members. Just in the past 9 months I've served on the board, that CAT needs to scale back service in order to, because of the budgetary problems that they have to spend, you know, which is a spending problem. Bill Jones wrote himself on a document circulated to the board, current service levels are not financially sustainable in the short or long term. And so, you know, we have to ask ourselves, you know, what transit service and what scope do we want to bring to Cumberland County to support its growth?
And
I think we need more.
That opportunity for that big change,
Yeah.
significant change.
Yeah.
You know, cutting back services is a
And
scenario,
it's-
but maybe the scenario is get more services out there.
And it's painless because it's planning administrative spending, you know, for buses on the street to serve the people and the businesses and organizations coming in.
So, I'm glad Keith is here. I want to ask a question, Keith. The organizing documents and so forth that created the authority and everything, what do they say about Cumberland County's participation, or that you had an opportunity to review that? I mean, right now, I think, and the reason why I was asking Mike about how the other board members feel, I think the board itself, if there's a majority, you know, has the ability to essentially, you know, direct certain things, including like, you know, following the agreement that we all, you know, agreed to last year. And so in the interim, you know, that's what we would do. But if we're thinking, you know, of only for right now, and are contemplating something effective July the 1st. I'm just curious as to what are there any notice requirements or whatever? If, for example, there would be another opportunity for us to consider by July the 1st, what strings are attached, I guess, to CAT is my question.
I'd have to check that, and frankly, I think Mike knows more about the bylaws at this point than I do, because he's been studying them and, I guess, formulating possible revisions. I looked at them months ago. I can't answer that question, but I can get that to you promptly, unless Mike, you know it offhand.
I think, Keith,
I think that's something we ought to examine and know, what our liabilities are,
That's going to be something, and I don't know, Mike would know this, what debt that entity itself has. I don't know, has it done bond issues, has it
No,
done something like that?
it has no debt.
That's good news. That's very good news. It makes it considerably easier.
Yes, it does.
And then I remember
We're
Toby
not
talking
ready to
about
cross that
the
bridge, I think it's important.
local match, 5-year. Okay, the waiver on that. But then you revert back to it, is what I'm reading here.
At the level it was 5 years prior, and that's
Right.
significant. That for Cumberland County would, in and of itself, result in approximately $100,000 per year savings at the point it restarts from where we would have otherwise.
From where, when it restarts from where we are today.
Yes.
And then if there's a subsequent consolidation, you could go into another 5-year waiver period. This is how I read that, or how I'm reading it, and how Toby explained it
Correct.
when he was here.
And that's why the
So-
savings is so much larger.
Mhm.
Right, but that does require the consolidation.
It does require
Yes.
consolidation,
And
but the savings are scaled depending upon how many entities get together, and that will adjust the local savings.
Right.
It's not an all or nothing proposition. It's, what.
But when you are in for those 5 years and not pulling out.
Right. Right.
I mean, I'm kind of looking at the solicitor. You're not saying, oh gee, 2 years down the road here now, this was like a really bad idea.
Only unless there's some provision built in for that to happen, which I think would be somewhat unusual.
Okay.
So I have a question, a follow-up question to this. And this is for both people who went to the meeting. In the document, summary document, it's public consolidation of principles. It says who, which agencies is responsible for the decision to consolidate public transportation system. My question is, how literally should we take the first point? I understand, looking at the second point might provide context on the intent. But the first statement says, transit authority boards and all local funding partners are responsibility for choosing to consolidate or not. And my question is, does that give transit authorities the same or more rights to determine whether consolidation occurs as compared to the funding partners?
It was mentioned, if I can, because I just came from a transit board meeting a little while ago. One of the board members made the comment that we don't decide, and I think this is an appropriate perspective. Now, it's not a legal answer to your question, but the transit board member said, we don't decide whether we consolidate regionalize or not. That's up to the governments that we serve. And there was no opposition.
And who pays the bills?
And there was no opposition to that.
Yeah.
So that's.
No, I think, yeah.
I think it's who's bringing the checkbook.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the county code, it's up to the counties to determine the transportation service that they want to provide. So, and I think Toby has more or less, emphasized that. That's our responsibility.
I just wanted
Okay,
to.
yeah,
sort of
and
clarify
I see,
what happens.
I hadn't, that didn't really jump out, but I know, I see where you're coming from, Larry. But no, at the end of the day, it's up to the commissioners and in the case of CAT, I guess also the city of Harrisburg and their elected representatives.
I would also think that in addition to possibly Keith and Mike taking a look at the bylaws, that in terms of, as Commissioner Ritz has said, we may not be at the point of crossing the bridge, I think understanding all of our options and consequences and wiggle room that we have would be advantageous strictly for giving us the benefit of making a fully informed decision. I think PennDOT can also provide us with some information, because ultimately, what makes us an attractive partner for any merger is our transportation funds that we bring along with us. And the question ultimately becomes, depending on our relationship with CAT's ongoing existence or what have you, is what happens to our money. Is it transferable if we were to go to another option? And I think PennDOT can help us with some information, given that they ultimately are responsible for the use of those funds. So I'd be happy to inquire on our behalf.
Yeah.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, Dave Kilmer from BARDA and whatever, SCTA, he pointed out a lot of the things, a lot of the questions that we were asking are the same things that they went
They
through.
did when they started.
In other words, making
Yeah.
sure nobody's stealing any money back from the
Yeah, finding out exactly what's on the books, what all that depreciation is going for.
Yeah.
Or as he said, what the debt is, if there's any out there. So,
So, I mean, everybody, all the counties, individual counties, everybody has that concern, naturally, that you want to be, responsible for your, make sure you're getting your fair share of the savings if you're, but, those are all issues that I think can be resolved. And to make sure that, we're all being treated fairly. But in any event, I guess, the conversation we were going to have here today, I don't know whether it's possible. I know in the budget we were looking at yesterday, maybe there would be a way, and I'll just throw this out there, to put like two line items in there. One that would indicate some connection to the first half of the year for capillary transit, or allocation of capillary transit, and then maybe the other half then to whatever to be decided. But we could actually put that right in the budget document, or we can leave it the way it is, and just with the understanding that we're committing on to, or in a letter to capillary transit at this time, indicating that we're at this time going to fund a half a year, and then move forward with the adoption of a budget that has full year funding, and then make the determination at a later date as to how that's going to work, whether all the money's going to be needed, whether it's not going to be needed, or we move in another direction. So, however,
well, in fact, a new board can open the budget anyway.
yeah, well,
Whatever's voted on, a new board in January can reopen the budget, and I'm seeing a nod from the solicitor, so that could be addressed at that time.
The money's there, it's just, would you draw down the second half of payments? I mean, anything you can.
Well, the money's there if it's agreed upon to be spent.
There's a budget.
There's a budget?
The budget allocates to you
Yeah, it
expense.
does. Yeah.
And it would be your decision.
but I guess what I'm saying though is that if we're going to move in this direction as we consider the budget, and if that's the determination that's being made, that we ought to communicate that to the CAT board, and we could do that. Whoever could do that at the beginning of the year too.
That's right.
Whatever you think is appropriate.
Well, in the past years, you have asked the staff to come up with recommendations, and I'm hearing consensus. We'd be happy to draw up a draft.
And we have to pass a budget before the end of the year, so. I mean,
But as far
yes.
as answering Kat's question as to, will you give us this money, we can express our intention.
They made a request, and they ought to know what it is we're doing at this point.
Right, and I think we'd be happy to draft a response for your review and approval.
Sounds good. Did we lose one of our commissioners here?
I guess.
He evaporated.
Okay. Anything else for us?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good.